Spit on it, I promise. Testing
Hello?
1 2. Testing 1 2. Minimal spit. There you go, sir. Spit on it, I promise. Testing
Hello?
1 2. Testing 1 2. Minimal spit. There you go, sir. Spit on it, I promise. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Minimal spit. There you go, sir.
That any better? Same thing? Same thing. Where's Alan? Oh, that's a little over 2 acres. 2 acres. Oh, I see him. Yeah. See how long we can make tonight. No, sometimes when it,
Yeah,
when you think you're going to do a long, like the other night, I thought for sure we'd be in and out.
This one looks like there's going to be no turkey scouting this evening.
Yeah. There's no families arguing or.
Well, based upon all the notes and stuff I've got, paperwork, etc. Let's see. Where'd my glasses go? Uh-oh. Oh, shit.
I was about to say, I don't think
Yeah.
those ones are going to work in here. It's going to be a little dark.
Don't leave
Now, are
those.
those prescription?
No, no. I don't need them to see it. I need them to see it.
Maui Jim, some good sunglasses.
Oh yeah, I've got like 8 pair.
Yeah, I got a bunch. I used to have those. I got a bunch of coasters now. I get the all glass ones. They're literally made of glass.
Yeah, I've got. They're heavy though.
They're heavy. That's the only thing.
It goes down, but not up. There we go. That's as high as it goes. Well, now you got it down. Go ahead and turn it over.
It's up.
Uh-oh, I'm getting out of order.
I think it's not what the rest of this is. Not all those. Up there, up there. We also have the ones in the, yes.
Oh yeah.
Faye, make sure everybody's got their mics on down there.
No, I guess so.
Make sure everybody's got them on. Says otherwise they won't be able to hear a thing on the recording.
Sorry, sir, I didn't mean to be forward.
Fine. Y'all want to make sure your mics are on.
Okay, it's time for us to start.
They're very good. I don't like it either. It is, yeah. I think it's
Okay, let's go ahead and get started, please. All right, let's call this meeting of the workshop of the Planning Commission to order. We do have a quorum. We have everyone present tonight. We need to review and approve the agenda. So do I have a motion to either do some changes or to approve the agenda as it stands.
Move to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, kind of one addition, one small addition, I want to, as a item D, you see this. 4.
You need to use your mic.
On item D, I'm sorry. I was looking this up, Mr. O'Bannon, just want to have a really brief conversation about our potential rezoning application. I'll just show it to you. Paulo Bannon, it's tax bill number 40 dash, it's right beside 40-20.
Would you like to put that in front of A instead of afterward, just in case? I don't know how long.
It's 4019.
No,
Just a very,
I'm in terms of order.
it doesn't matter, somewhere, it can be before A or it can.
Well, I'm afraid we might be running long tonight, so,
Yeah, we'll just have a very, matter of fact, I can do it almost first.
okay,
thing.
let's do that, then we'll put it in front.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I was trying to get that. That's that tax bill number right there.
Okay.
So, Mr.
All right.
Chairman, that's gonna be 3A.
I guess so, yeah.
Or,
Five,
he said 4.
4D, okay.
He would have to sit here through all of our.
Yes, that's what I was, okay.
That's why I was saying if we put it
Okay,
at
yeah,
3A, he
sure.
would be able to leave after we finish.
Okay,
I'm not trying to interrupt, but.
instead of
I don't
old
wanna see him
business,
sit here through all this discussion we're gonna have to have about these other things.
Oh, man,
If you don't want to.
Powell may like to.
I like to hear something every once in a while. Okay, then no problem, sir.
I guess that means we have to restate our agenda and revote, I guess. All right, so we're now looking at Mr. O'Bannon as a new 4A. Is that correct?
Part of it, yes. I'll move to amend.
Okay.
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, the amended agenda is approved. All right, review of the minutes from the March 16th meeting. Any changes or comments on those? Okay, if no comments, is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. All right, and let's let then Mr. O'Bannon have his quick preview. Ligon, do you want to present that?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, and I'm sorry for adding that in that fashion. I just wanted to get this on everyone's radar. We remember, if you look at the zoning map, the 4020, Alan. It's that parcel right there. So Madison Holdings, aka Mr. O'Bannon, they recently purchased that parcel. It adjoins the 39 acres that, if you turn that zoning, remember we sort of zoned that front portion commercial. We have a residential.
Right.
Expecting those apartments. Well, that one that's highlighted, he recently purchased. There is a dwelling on that, but the idea is to bring that in to the commercial corridor. You can see, right there against 29. So the plan is get some more details for May, and we'll do 2 work sessions on it, May, June, and anticipate a public hearing, whatever the July joint meeting is. So just kind of wanted to, if Mr. O'Bannon wants to add any comments to that, we just want to kind of, again, just real briefly put that on everyone's radar. That will be something to anticipate here in a few months.
Unless you have any questions, I mean, that basically explains that we just purchased it. I'd like to add it on to the commercial piece that I have. It's already been in, so it's right on the corner.
Okay, any questions for Mr. O'Bannon?
comment. I mean,
Mhm.
that piece of property right there makes it ideal for everybody that lives on that road and to bring that traffic out. I mean, it's a good thing for what is gonna happen there, in my opinion.
Okay, any other comment?
I just have, so it's now the house part is zoned R now, R1, what's it zoned? What is that?
That yellow is R1, that's correct.
And then it'll be boundary adjustment to be brought in and then it'll be rezoned.
Doesn't have to do a boundary adjustment, but their application would be to rezone
Okay,
that parcel. If
That's
it
what-
wants to bring it in as a boundary, that's
Okay.
at a later
Right.
date, that's fine.
I may bring it in later as a boundary adjustment, but I just like it standalone right now.
And it could help with an entrance and all those type of things to that parcel. So I think it makes sense. But again, I just wanted to at least put it out there. So sorry for adding that late, but we kind of came in later this week. I mean, last week, and I hadn't included it, but I told them that we would just have a brief conversation like this. So thanks.
Okay, any other questions from the planning commission? Do we have any comments from the public on this one? Okay, thank you. All right, next case is case number SU 06-22-13. Ahmed Helmi has applied for a special use permit to operate an event venue on an A1 agriculture zone parcel. In the A1 zoning district, an event venue use is allowable by special use permit and required to adhere to Articles 14-18 through 14.18.4 of the zoning ordinance. The applicant is seeking a special use permit to allow the site to be utilized for the following uses: up to 70 individual short-term rental or glamping units, a single structure containing a lodge, restaurant, and a wellness center, a maintenance/housekeeping building, and an employee housing building. The applicant has proffered a conceptual site layout design for the parcel and eliminated large-scale outdoor events as an allowable use. The subject 38.6 acre parcel does not contain a postal address, but is located on Ford Shop Road, Route 618, roughly 1,325 feet from the intersection of Ford Shop Road and Beamtown Road, Route 632. The parcel is identified on Madison County's tax maps as 42-19. All right, Ligon, any
Yeah, so
additions?
the applicant was intending to move forward with this, and this is why the ad's written this way, for May. It would be for the May, I think that's May 4th, Wednesday. But we just sort of thought that it would be a good idea to potentially have 2 work sessions on this. So that's why the ad is written, the ad's written, ready to go. But at this point, we're still sort of, I think Mr. Helmi is still getting feedback. One of the things that, with our joint hearing process, that by the time an application is presented, even though I know we've talked about it for a couple months, sometimes the public doesn't really get in tune to these things until sometimes a few weeks for the hearing. And of course, it's a joint hearing. So the thought was a little more time that we could give the public a chance to look at this, the better it would be. So it's anticipated, depending on maybe the feedback gets tonight, that would move forward. In this instance, it'd be I think June 1st is that first Wednesday. So we have another opportunity in May to kind of go over any questions or issues that might come up tonight. If you look, and I haven't really done a deep dive into a report yet, and I'm still kind of waiting. I think the applicant's still waiting to kind of see where the commission stands. If you can see, he did do a work session as we kind of recommended on April 7th. I guess that was a Thursday. I wasn't able to attend, but I think several of y'all might have been here, and I think a couple of people from the board were here. So I just wrote down some of the things, and I went back and watched the meeting. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear the questions from the ordinance. I was able to hear from the audience, but I was able to hear some of the responses. So I was able to kind of put together, at least in what I wrote out, some of the concerns. What exactly is the applicant potentially applying for? And again, I just kind of went over what the special use application process would be. Of course, concerns over traffic, hours of operation. What would VDOT's recommendation be? I think as proposed, and as I said in the little synopsis that I wrote, that you're definitely looking at a commercial entrance as proposed if this was to be approved. Probably some right turn lane, a taper lane, widening of the road potentially. I think all those things are definitely on the table. If you look at Mr. Miller, who lives on Fort Shop Road, sent me an email. So I thought that his concerns were probably pretty reflective. A lot of the concerns you can see, the density with the potential of being 200 up to 260 people on the site if it was, at sort of max occupancy. I did talk to Emily Bourdain from the health department. Just talk, water and sewer is obviously a big part of this. I think that we both agreed that with an engineer and the fund, and if you have the funds and the engineer, anything is possible. I mean, to a certain degree, there might be some barriers. If the soil doesn't handle this type of capacity, then your density is going to be limited. But generally speaking, I'll just kind of go over on the other side of the mountain. If you're familiar with Yogi Bear Campground, that probably has a density of around 300 people on 60 acres. They have their own package plant. So it is possible. Whether or not that would, if it was approved like this, whether or not that would be practical is another question. But I've sort of my own personal sort of questions that I have is that the density at 70. It is a lot for him. I think it's being very direct. I would probably feel, just me personally in analyzing this, if it was in that 20 to 30, maybe 20 to 35 would be sort of maybe a density that would be more in line with maybe at least how I envision sort of these applications and what we've seen in the past. Needless to say, Mr. Helmy has his own sort of take on the folks that would be there, the type of tourist that's attracted to this. But regardless, you're looking at that type of density. There's no question that your traffic and the impacts sort of in or around there, it'll change the quote unquote neighborhood. It just will. But I guess that's kind of the part of trying to balance economic development and preservation. That's not an easy job. So if you have any questions for me, I see Mr. Helmy's here. He'll be happy to answer some questions. So please feel free to, any questions,
Okay. Does anyone have a question for Legan?
I guess one of the questions I got, Lincoln, is there hasn't been a permit filed on this. How do we know how the landowners feel? We've never spoken to the landowners or heard anything from the landowners, and there's no permit.
Well, I mean, I know people have talked to the landowners. They obviously have a contract with Mr. Helmy. I need to, before the application's filed or when it's filed, I'll always get something written in writing from the landowners that allows them to do this. But I don't think he's doing it without their knowledge and quote unquote approval. I mean, they're in a contract to purchase if this is approved.
Okay. Anyone else? Mike, I know you were at the public meeting on April 7th. Do you have any points to add to the comments that Ligon had mentioned?
No, because I think they all came back out. I made a lot of notes myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Miller pretty much identified all the comments, and made his own notes apparently. I guess the sewer removal is one of the bigger things. I mean, I suppose that all that's been engineered to cover the 260 people. No, it hadn't been engineered yet. And the idea would be, again, if this was approved, I guess the sort of the issue with the applicant is how much do you put into that kind of what I call the hard engineering? What's now is fairly easy. Getting a landscape architect to do a layout, walk the property, look at the contours, say this is how it would lay out. The difficult part, and that's why I called Emily, just to have a very direct conversation with the health department, is that is it possible to do this? Is it something that can be engineered? Yes, we believe it can. If for some reason it can't, then even if he has a special use approval, it's he's only going to be able to put the number of units that can be engineered on the site. I mean, and that's why I'm sort of using the campground, as an example that at least in the region, it is done. It has been done, but going forward, we're not going to really, if this was to be approved in any fashion, we're not going to necessarily have that element, an engineer saying, yep, I have a stamp plan here. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. You're going to build this type of system. There's an option to do conventional, put several units tied into a conventional system. If that will support that, that'd be a lot of conventional systems, but it's possible. So,
Well, look, if he starts to move forward, will we have health and highway approval before this special use permit comes to us? Is you asking for this, or he's asking for this, just on the sketch that we got?
right. Well, the second part, if we approve the broad plan, and then the second, it's sort of like with Crest Array, the next step, would be getting a site plan with what I always call the hard engineering that would show this is how we will support this site plan. We perk these sites. We're going to build this, package plant if possible. So that would be the next step. And again, if the applicant can't satisfy VDH requirements, then you can only do what will be satisfied, from what VDH requires, and that's what the engineer and VDH come up with is an acceptable plan. It meets all the codes and regulations of VDH. So, yes, ma'am.
A few weeks ago, we had a Zoom presentation and a similar project in Shenandoah Valley, I believe, was mentioned. Do we know anything about this project?
Which one's that?
In the
Bryce.
valley somewhere? I don't Shenandoah.
Well, maybe he can tell us a little bit about. I think what we want to get tonight is we have a very frank conversation from a broad perspective. And again, I know there's not a public comment, where there's not a hearing, but is it something that it's just a non-starter as far as the density? He's been very upfront that he needs this type of density to make this project work. I've been pretty upfront that I think it's a high number. I think it's, so I think that's sort of what I would like to have tonight. And I know that there's also board supervisors involved in this as well, but I think that's really sort of the big picture tonight. Is this something, or maybe it's just one of these things? Look, we really don't know until we hear from the public, and so.
Will this project be required for DDQ to look into it?
Yeah, because of the disturbance that over that acre, DEQ will be involved in, with the, yeah.
I would say, like Danny said, probably the core too, as close as it is to the river.
I'm not really sure if it'd be core, because usually I think they're involved if you're doing any kind of disturbance or crossing of a river. I mean, he's not, what's shown on here, there's nothing in the floodplain. would be developed. So
But one of the concerns I guess I got that we can add to that list, if we're gonna bring this amount of people and this amount of cars in, are we gonna have some kind of, or will DDQ look into it, retention system to catch all the runoff where people pour out from the grills and dump out from wash water and all that type of stuff so it don't make it to the river?
that will have to be part of the engineer plan, is to show that it's captured and released in a manner that meets all the DEQ requirements. So they'll be involved. It'll be, it's engineered and, but I guess at this phase, we know what would have to happen next, what is going to be required. And if we can't get that, we can't satisfy DEQ, can't satisfy VDH, then it's either going to have to be scaled back or
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I have enough information to even make an accurate decision on whether we want it here or don't want it here. Until he comes back and gives us some particulars of what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. We know what he's going to do. The question is, how's he going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to analyze it. Obviously, we'll put what I'm telling you on paper. But I guess from, kind of being in your seat sometimes and understanding where you're coming from is that, at least to me, we've been talking about this for a couple months is what is your thought of this density and this location? If this, like I said, if this was half the size or a third of the size, I feel like it would be a little more, at least from my perspective, just my 2 cents. I think it would be a little easier to digest, maybe. So I guess that's what the feedback we're looking for now. I know we don't have the application necessarily in front of us, but it's I'll write and analyze everything, but it's still on its face, it's going to be what you're seeing here. So yes, ma'am.
What about emergency services? Have they been looking at this?
Yeah, we did meet at the site and had a meeting with Gavin Helm and Brian Gordon, and we came up with a plan. They were comfortable with providing a sort of one of those kind of 4-wheeler Gators type trucks and having something that's dedicated. The actual roadways at the paths of 9 feet, a graded gravel road will be able to be accessed. But if there is an event, there'll also be someone on staff. The staff would be trained and be able to get somebody out of that site to Fort Shop Road. So that's something that's definitely been discussed, and I think they're pretty comfortable with that idea.
What about a fire?
Well, same scenario. Brian and Gavin were kind of, there's if this is built as it is with the contours, with the grading, the 9-foot travel pass, it's not exactly. There's probably some parts of the county that aren't as easy to access. So I think they're comfortable, but we can definitely dig into that a little more, or a lot more, if or when the application comes forward.
How many acres of the 38 are actually in a B zone for floodplain mapping purposes?
I think if you look at that sort of that lighter green toward the bottom of it, I think that delineates the flood zone. So I would say maybe 20, not even 20%, maybe 15%. That
It is the light green.
Yeah.
Right, so it's roughly the bottom portion of it.
But we don't have any actual acreage figure then.
No, it just that is it right there.
Right.
I can figure it out, but I mean, just off the top of my head, I'd say if that's 40 acres, you're probably looking at 10 maybe.
All right, so we're actually looking at potentially 70 sites on 28 acres instead of 38 acres. And plus you've got to subtract the
space for the lodge, for the maintenance building, and for the dormitory or whatever housing for
That's
the
right.
staff.
So that would be significant density. I mean, you're looking at roughly 22 or 23 units per acre. No, that's not quite right. The three, yes, yeah, I think that's a,
2.5 per acre. I think.
yeah, 2 per acre roughly, a little, somewhat of a variance from that.
Yeah. Peter, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Everybody's going to get away from it all.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be, and this is somewhat along the lines of what Danny mentioned, that we refer this matter to a committee, that we as a planning commission develop a list of potential concerns and work with the applicant so we can fully understand how those concerns will be responded to. And then we will have something definite that the entire commission can deal with.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, to give you an example of what Danny and Peter are talking about. At the community presentation, along with the waste treatment questions, there was at least one person who raised a question about the water sources, drinking water. Now, I know from the Cresseray, the work that they did, before she even submitted a special use permit, she had a hydrologic survey done of the property, so she knew in advance what kind of water sources she had. That's just one example. And that's the kind of thing, that's the information that's missing right now, that we really can't make any kind of informed decision without that kind of information. I mean, it's possible that you're going to be able to get a well on that property that will supply over 200 people, but it's also possible that you can't. So we don't know.
Right. Well, with no water, there's no development. I mean, so I guess kind of back to my original sort of thought is that the water in the sewer.
I don't think we like to operate that way.
Yeah,
we don't like to say, okay, let's do this and see what happens.
Right. Well, yeah, but it's, I mean, just by my experience, this type of engineering, when you're looking at the special use permit, I mean, to sort of put that sort of upfront, again, I kind of call the hard engineering part is really not, maybe he can talk about his experience in Shenandoah County, but it's really not customary. I would just expect that to be, if you get the concept approved, the special use, you come back and then you really dive into that sort of, and that's what Barbara was going to do as well with Cresseray. So if that's something that the commission says, well, we need to have this up front, so be it. But just in my respectfully, in my humble opinion, it would be something that I would expect.
We had a
At the site plan.
lot of information on Cresseray to consider when we made a recommendation on special use permit. At this point, I feel I have very little,
Yeah,
and
I provided all the
certainly
information.
inadequate information.
I provided.
And all we really have in the way of a comprehensive list is Mr. Miller's. And just off the top of my head, I can think of a number of additions I would make to his list.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I ask the applicant a question?
Are we ready to move to that stage? Anybody else have a question for Lee? All right, certainly. Will the applicant please address?
My question would be, sir, if this is approved and you buy this piece of property based on this being approved, Are you gonna develop this, or are you gonna sell this to another company and have another company develop it?
The plan is to develop,
You're gonna develop yourself, not another company.
that's the plan.
And I don't mean to jump in here, but maybe you can, and I know you've done these type of, other communities, you did it in Shenandoah. I mean, what has been your process as far as for the kind of the initial approval? I mean, this is a concern. I think it's a fine concern to have, but, when it comes to the engineering, what has been your experience with sort of other communities and do you mind answering that?
Invite him to stand up. Invite him to stand up.
Okay. So with the Shenandoah County, the process was basically, we started with a site plan, very similar to that one, with the program, like the development program, including the number of units, the type of units, the accessory buildings, and circulation in terms of roads, pathways, trail systems. Throughout that process, we talked to different departments and different agencies. So we had conversations with the fire department. We had conversations with VDOT, also the health department, and we basically got initial recommendations from these departments. So with VDOT, and in that case too, we talked to we usually don't consider a property before we have a conversation with VDOT. So with VDOT, they said the site distance allows, the width of the road allows, it will be a commercial entrance, but it's doable, as opposed to other properties where it's impossible to have any entrance for that kind of project. In terms of the fire department, again, we also had conversations with EMS and fire, like we did with Madison. They give us initial thoughts, initial recommendations, which we think we can work with. It is feasible to have 9 feet gravel roads. We try to minimize grading, so we work with the contours and the ridges that we have on the property. And in that case, it's very doable to allow emergency vehicles and brush trucks, if need be, for fire to reach these tents. Other alternatives having like dry hydrants, for example. For the lodge and these main structures, there will be access to a full fire apparatus because these are 22 feet roads. So that was the process in Shenandoah. This is from like a planning engineering standpoint. With the community, we did engage with primarily the neighboring properties and the neighboring HOAs. Had many conversations, added proffers to satisfy their needs in terms of noise, lighting, hours of operation, hunting. Again, it depends from one community to the other, but we worked very hard from them and we got letters of support from the community there. And it's a compromise on each side. It's never 100% satisfactory to one party versus the other. So it's not a zero-sum game. So once we reached that level, we went through the planning commission and then the board. And there were proffers, in addition to these voluntary conditions that we've added to satisfy the community needs. There were proffers related to getting final approvals from the health department, from the fire department, from VDOT and what have you, to get approved for the detailed plans and the building permits. So there was no hard engineering when we got these approvals.
Right.
Yeah. We're working, and again, it depends. Like for example, in other states, they have very different requirements. Some do require hard engineering, like California, for example, where you go through resource studies, cultural, historical, biological, emissions. It's endless.
Don't forget endangered species.
Yeah. So yeah, it really depends on the state and the county.
Kind of just for our information, how many sites were you doing in, was it Bryce? Is that what you said?
50.
And what was the acreage of that?
It was 50 on 50.
So you're looking at 1 per acre, basically.
Yeah.
Compared here at over 2
Yeah,
acres.
it's a little bit shy of 50, but I'd say 50 acres, maybe 47 or so.
What's the name of the company running the development at Bryce?
So Getaway,
Okay, and your company still owns Getaway, is that correct?
no, for that property, we sold it, and that was just the partnership itself, the ownership, us as a partners, it was an internal thing where one of the partners, we had to dissolve the partnership, so we sold the property. But we made sure we're selling it to a developer that is capable, has presence, and was successful in the area. They have a property in Greene County. And at the end of the day, they basically took the permits and they're following each and every condition in the permit to get the final approvals. So they're not changing. Actually, they're lowering the density. They're not having the restaurant or the spa. So they're not having the accessory buildings that we had on the property.
And how many years ago was that?
That's like 6-7 months ago.
Thank you.
Yes.
So one of the things that was brought out during the meeting was a presentation that maybe some of the board members would like to hear. And didn't you say that each site was going for about $350 a night?
That's the average daily rate.
Yep, we'll have public comment. Any other questions or comments from the planning commission?
I just have one question for you. I assume you did some sort of feasibility study personally on how many sites you would need to make it a viable venture. Or what is, obviously 70 is probably not the number. What's your bottom end on?
I'd say like 65 to 70 would be the bottom.
65%.
Yeah. And the reason is that with these, given that the ADR is 350, you do have significant fixed cost in terms of number of employees, in terms of the quality of service that you want to offer. And therefore, with this higher fixed cost, the more tents, the more feasible it becomes. Because anyway, you're paying employees regardless of the number of tents that you have.
Sure.
And once again, this is like 6 months out of the year, correct?
I'm sorry?
This is like 6 months out of the year?
Yes,
What
it
makes
starts in,
it,
I'd say like give or take April till November, end of November. Yeah.
You have an operator lined up to whom you would transfer the property?
Yes. Usually it's one of, you have a few operators that we would consider for different projects, but it would be ones that have like more than 5 or 6 properties as we speak today, or they have experience in that space.
So you don't have somebody lined up.
I wouldn't
You
sign
have some in mind.
I wouldn't sign a management contract until I secure the site. So I wouldn't be going to Hyatt or Collective or Terramore or until I know exactly what I'm building, so I can sign a management company depending on the concept and the development program. At this point, if I go say I'm signing a management contract for 70 units and I get refused, then for them it wouldn't make sense to sign anything at this point. So it is subject to me getting the approvals first and starting the negotiations.
Could I ask a question? And it's because I can't read the fine print. Maybe you get older, that happens. But the little white dots, they represent a glamping spot, or what do they represent?
No, these are just numbers for the legend. So number 1 would be the tents. I can, yeah.
Well, anyway, I guess the question I want to ask Sean, I guess. Can you put any of these glamping spots in the floodplain?
Off the top.
Well, they're not permanent
Off the top
structures.
of my head, I would say no. And the reason is you're kind of, well, depending on what kind of construction design there is, you may be permitted to do that. But, it's not an absolute prohibition in terms of building in a V zone, but there are elevation requirements building restrictions, as a practical matter, most people find it is not economically feasible to build in floodplains.
I know they're just platforms in our houses,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I'm just trying to get in my mind, if you can't put those in the floodplain, then that cuts the acreage down a lot. Oh,
And Pete, I will say that sort of like with Crest Array, my idea is that what would be presented would be sort of, hopefully would be a proffer that what was put forward, if it was to change, like we said with Crest Array, if there's a little bit of change because there's a rock here and we got to move this over, but what would be put forward would be what we would see when with the actual site plan, with all the real hard details come forward would be substantially in compliance with what is shown as a special use. Could be a little deviation, and that's what we said with Crest Array. So what I envision is what you see if it is built out was what you would get here. So.
And the plan is to really use this area closer to the river for like natural, nature trails and recreation, just, but no hard structures or no permanent structures on it.
Mr. Elliott, to answer your question, someone please correct me if I'm wrong, I suffer the same limitations Mr. Elliott does. I don't think that those white circles indicate sites for the glamping units. I think the glamping units are kind of they almost look like fingers, going into the trees. I may be
The little rectangles.
wrong
beside the
about
road.
that, but I think that's right.
Yeah, all right.
There,
Read the legend.
I can read it down.
All right, blow it up even more.
Sorry, I just couldn't see.
Nope,
Mr. Elliott?
no swell.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant from the planning commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Yes,
like to.
Mike.
So are these units going to have TVs in them? Because I was looking at one of the noise things here.
No TVs.
No TVs.
No.
And you also said no radios the other night.
It's a regular question.
Yeah, I think on Thursday you said that the guests were not to be allowed radios either. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, we don't have radios or TVs
No boom
in these
boxes.
tents. Yes.
So couldn't someone bring a TV or a radio?
I haven't heard of anyone bringing a TV.
After 8 years, and you would be surprised the number of people who want Wi-Fi and cable internet. It's ridiculous.
Especially at 3:50.
So Wi-Fi, I mean, they have their phones, and there is service over there, and we will have Wi-Fi in the lodge, hopefully. But I mean, again, it's the type of guests that comes to these areas are not. I don't think. I'd say the vast majority are not looking to watch TV in their tents or pump up the volume and listen to music. And there will be quiet hours anyway. And that's what we did with Shenandoah. And usually this is what we do. We have like quiet hours. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I got a couple questions. First one's for Ligon. The presentation that Mr. Helmy gave on April 7th does the planning commission have that?
It is not uploaded to the county's website. I do have it. Alan provided me with a link to watch it. I mean, I hadn't sent it out, but if that would help, I'll be happy to send it to everybody.
Well, I think so, because I mean, if we're talking at a 30,000 foot level tonight, that certainly gives an idea of what he's got in mind, for one thing. The second thing is, Mr. Elmy, I was at the April 7th meeting with the residents that you all had contacted, and there was a lot of them here. And they had a lot to say. So based on what they had to say that night, have you and Ligon started working on the proffers to satisfy some of their concerns?
So, I mean,
That's just a yes or no question at this point.
Yeah, like Ligon and I did not start putting any proffers to add to the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what the planning commission's indicating they want to, they like to hear some feedback on that. And then my last thing is, we want to see folks come to Madison for a certain experience. And based on the density that you're showing for this property of 70, which you said on April 7th that you needed that to make it worthwhile endeavor. But based on that density, how can you provide the experience that I think you want them to have and that we would all want them to have? I mean, is there screening? I mean, you're not on top of each other. You understand my question?
Yeah, I do. So really, we worked with the contours and the slopes of the property to try to, first of all, create orientations for these tents to create some privacy for each unit. We also, as you can see, I mean, this is very, very conceptual, but we use the existing trees on the property to isolate tents. We also, what we do is we add landscape between the tents. So it is the orientation, the slopes, and the landscape in order to isolate these tents as much as possible. We also try to, as you can see, have the lodge closer to the road, the maintenance and the employee housing as far as possible from the accommodations for the experience itself. Create recreational areas closer to the river, create nature trails to have them, have an experience that they're really looking for. Again, they're coming here to unplug and unwind. And again, with the outfitter service that we have, we do a lot of co-marketing. Yesterday, we had a conversation with, for example, Early Mountain, and how can we do co-promotions, co-marketing with existing businesses, because a lot of those folks want to experience the local attractions during the day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cardi, one thing I will add is that moving forward, if this moves forward, and one of the thoughts I had was looking at the existing land, the existing tree cover, and maybe doing a layer showing what he's got a landscape architect that's working on this, showing what cover would be added, what trees would be added. And I think that would maybe could be a possibility if the applicant would be willing to aggressively even maybe go above what's sort of shown now in landscaping, planting, and kind of turning it more maybe into somewhat of a not a real dense forest, but really maybe introduce more tree cover would also, I think, maybe help the experience and could maybe also minimize some of the visual impacts of it. Not that the tents or anything but it will stand out. But I think it can be landscape in a way that could be part of the special use permit. So just an idea that I had thought of.
And I mean, if I can add one comment, I think we can look at the number of tents in absolute terms or in relative terms. And I think the experience itself and the concept itself might make sense, that it's very in line with Madison's county's character, the rural experience of Madison, as opposed to having like 30, 50 tents with a very different experience that is not as light on the land, that is more towards concerts and events and amplified music. So I think that, yes, the number of tents is a concern, but I think we should not look at it in absolute terms.
Okay, kind of following up on Cardi's third point, at our next workshop, then, can we expect to see some proffers, some conditions, something we can actually begin looking at, like you said, maybe the overlay, so we can look at what kind of landscaping?
Yes, that's a good question. I think what I'm hearing is to give Mr. Helmy to submit the application, and I will, the next work session, roll up my sleeves and sort of, I'll just use Crestway as an example, you know, the analysis that was done for that and the conditions that I would recommend, taking what we have already, what we've discussed tonight in previous meetings, we'll just put it into a list of conditions and come back in a month with something that is got a lot of very specific recommendations for moving this forward, with understanding that the hearing would be June the 4th. That would be the.
Does anybody remember what the density is for Crestway?
So a little different. That's 750 acres. 750 acres. Now, the short-term rental aspect was somewhere around 40, 41, 42 short-term rentals. I mean, cabins, glamping sites. So, I mean, this has at 70 has more than the 750 acres one. But of course, they had also other facilities and, you know, was an event venue, more in the spirit of an event venue than maybe this is really just isolating on the camping. I mean, you know, the short-term rental sort of aspect of it.
Okay. Any other questions from the Planning Commission?
I guess, Ligon, if you're gonna work on this, I would be really interested in knowing if we can't do anything in the floodplain, what that cuts the size of the property down to.
Yeah, I will just repeat.
Usable
Yeah,
property.
right. I will just say what Jamie constantly, the building official constantly says, you can build in the floodplain. It's just, you just have to follow the regulations. Now, he's indicated that they don't want to, you know, there are some different standards for building the floodplain. Mr. Helmy's indicated they're not interested in building the floodplain. They want to use that for recreation, for trails. That makes perfect sense. So, my understanding, and that will be, you know, something we'll discuss as a potential condition. And again, I would like to say that what is presented, what you see on this paper will be something that he'll be tied to with maybe some minor deviations.
I think what Pete's asking is when we start looking at this at the next time, along with the conditions and so forth, it would be helpful to us to actually have a measurement that tells us how much of that is.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just an actual
Yeah,
acreage.
that's easy enough.
Okay.
Ma-
Yes. Faye.
I just want to add one thing as the older person who probably doesn't go to these places much anymore. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, yes. I went to some places that I would never go to today in conditions with a pop-up tent and all that stuff. But we cannot imagine sitting here in Madison County unless some of you all have been out to places. And I mentioned last time we talked about this, such as at where you bring in $80,000, $100,000 RVs and what those people are willing to pay and what they are willing to do for a whole weekend. I don't think we really have a concept yet of what could be. I'm thinking, for instance, what goes on at Grays Mountain probably is not something, you know, people come flock in there for all the things they offer, which is different than this. I just don't want to be so narrow-minded that we can't imagine it. I mean, it does sound like a lot to me on a small amount, but then again, I just can't, I don't have that capacity yet to see exactly how it'll fit. So I just caution us not to be totally closed-minded to a lot of things. I know as far as like sewage, sheets out here is that we have at the end of the, 29 acre of land is what that's on. They have an alternative system where they take in how many thousands of people every day that pass through. I mean, I've learned a lot lately about a lot of things like that. There are some issues that have to be worked out. I agree. The water system, that's very important. But I don't want to be so narrow-minded that we pass up on something. And if they can, I know these businesses, at least the ones I've heard about, go through a lot of feasibility. Nathan mentioned just feasibility. People are willing to pay $350 a night. I know what they expect. He should know what he expect, what they expect. Therefore, if he knows he's got the customers to do it April through November, we should be at least open-minded to listening. And a lot of the things that were in Mr. Miller's letter are definitely very true with people here. And change is hard. But I think I'm willing to keep an open mind until we see a little more, whatever we need to see. But I just don't think we can envision yet what this is going to be.
Sorry, Mike. I agree with you. I mean, it's not necessarily my cup of tea because I've got my little shack on 3 acres, and that's probably as small as I want to go. But I mean, you look at Graves, how they got their tents. You know, you go up there for the Bluegrass Festival or something. I mean, I scaled it out. They appear to be maybe 50 feet apart from each other. I mean, if safety, sanitation, you know, all the access, any disturbance or impact on the neighbor's quality of life, all that stuff is addressed, could be addressed feasibly. I mean, if somebody wants to come down from the city and camp in a place like this, which I think they would like, it's worth considering.
Yeah, I think, you know, the questions we're asking are not meant to be oppositional, I think. We're just interested in information right now. And hopefully the next time we meet, we will have something filled in that we can be looking at.
Right. And I guess from kind of experience with Crest Array and why we've talked about this, I think I talked to Mr. Helmy a year ago, is I really want the public to have an opportunity to not feel as if this is something that just came up and I wanted that they have time to think about it, to comment, that they feel like, you know, like with Mr. The letter that he sent me, I told him, I said, I'll put it in the packet. I want people to see your comments. So that's one of my many concerns, is making sure people feel like they're heard on this. And
yeah, and I think the public meeting that Thursday was an excellent start on it.
Yeah.
Mike, you said had a question?
Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback on what y'all are saying. And goal 2 of our comprehensive plan states promote tourism and tourist visitor related enterprises, attraction events, and aggressive market Madison County as an attractive place to visit. So I would just like to piggyback on what Faye was kind of saying.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we talked about sewage and water,
Mhm.
and I've spent 60 years in the plumbing industry, and I can tell you, if you've got the money, you can get rid of the sewage and you can get more. So it ain't a question of how you do it, it's whether you want to spend the money to do it.
Yeah, but we may not want him to have to go to 100 sites in order to afford it.
Do you like my car?
Yeah. All right. Any other non-commercial comments?
I've got it down in the minutes.
It's on record now. Too late.
The record can reflect that Mr. Krigler's
Was
tongue
joking.
was firmly in his cheek when
Yes,
he made
okay.
that last comment.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the planning commission? If not, I think we have a comment from the public. Would you come up to the?
Questions that I forgot to mention.
Yeah. Would you come up and identify yourself and take the mic, please? Thank you.
Just had a couple questions that I thought of since the last meeting. One of which he was sitting there mentioning.
Sir, can you identify your name and generally where you live?
Sorry, I am Josh Clark. I'm located on Ford Shop Road. I'm about the middle way up Ford Shop Road. One of the concerns that I had with that is I was told that this meeting was only going to be kind of mentioned to properties that adjoin that property. Well, a lot of that is the same family. So therefore, it's not getting out in the neighborhood. I know a lot of my neighbors aren't overly thrilled with the idea of it. One of the feasibility questions I had for it is, he said there's 70 sites. You need probably at least 60 to 70 in order to make it feasible. Well, if this does not become feasible and you issue a special use permit and they go in there and dig all this up and put all these septics and water and all of this to 70 campsites and it flops and the business plan isn't successful, it doesn't work. Is it going to go back to agricultural land, or is it going to be stuck with all these little campsites and all of the septic and all of this water that no one can use? That's one issue. The other issue is just around the sharp bend from the property located, there is a culvert that goes under the road. That road on occasion does flood in high rains. I've actually seen the road bubble up due to water being under the road. A concern is the extreme amount of traffic that's going to be on that road is going to ultimately end up damaging that road and wearing that out and causing future problems too. So that was just a couple issues I just wanted to make public or make announce and see if that was maybe something could be put in the special use permit, that if it doesn't work, all of that mess gets cleaned up and we're turned back to agriculture. That's all.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, if not, I guess, Ligon, the next meeting we have, we'll look for at least some proffers and maybe those overlays. That sounds like an excellent idea to give us a better mental picture of what we're going to be looking at.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next case is case number SU-06-22-14. Dorothy and Ralph Martin have applied for a special use permit to operate an event venue on 3 A1 agricultural zoned acres or parcels, which they own, totaling roughly 154 acres. The applicants are seeking to host wedding receptions and similar events per Madison County zoning ordinance. Event venues hosting 15 or more events annually are not required to obtain special use permit. The applicant's anticipating exceeding 15 events annually. The subject property contains 2 dwellings addressed as 3033 and 3037 Hebron Valley Road, Madison, Virginia. The parcels are identified on the Madison County's tax maps as 31-30B, 31-30E, and 31-30. Okay, Ligon, would you give us some more information?
Yes, so the Martin's property, there are 3 parcels, as you can see, as outlined here. There are 2 dwellings on the parcel. One is sort of a smaller farmhouse, and the other is, as you can see the picture kind of behind the trees, is a pretty large house. I believe public records have it somewhere around 8,000 square feet. Very nice property. Right now, they are utilizing it for smaller events. The idea, if they do have a large event, they have a very nice area. I don't think they've done this yet, but they could have a tent put up. They do want to build at some point a sort of a venue. They have a space that they have, as I have a picture, they have a space that they would like to put this sort of a venue structure. 60x40 is an estimate at this point. The Martins are figuring right now that exact size. So that'd be something when we come back in May. We'll have an exact number on that. I hope to have an exact number on this, on the size of an actual sort of structure on the site. You can see it has a paved driveway. It's a very good entrance, but one of the things I think that VDOT would recommend is looking at that entrance is that it'd be paved out, maybe flared out a little more. 2 cars could pass on that private drive. You'd probably have to get in the grass a little bit. There is an area. Look at that very bottom corner picture. Yeah, to the right there. Behind that fence is an area that they would use for parking. It's flat. It's easy accessible. You could get hundreds of cars in that area. But again, don't think we're going to have events that large. Applicant understands if they have events over 300, anticipate having events over 300 people, they would get apply for a special event permit that we approved, that large scale outdoor event ordinance back in, I think that was January, we approved that. So anything over 300, we would at least have some information so we could pass it along to sheriff and emergency services just so they would know. Don't really anticipate that having many events that large. The only issue from an access I see is that Hebron Valley Road, You have really great, I'm sorry I did not get in picture. It was not intentional, but if you look at that one where the entrance is, very good sight distance. I guess that's to the north. The curve is probably, you have, hundreds of feet that way. There is a curve. If you're coming out to the right, and I'm sure all of you have been on Hepburn Valley, there is a somewhat of a curve there. Really nothing we can do about that, but I did talk to Miss Martin about maybe during the events, if you having events, just putting up some sort of signage or a flag on her property that says event, caution, slow down. When I go around a curve like that, I'd like to slow down generally, but maybe just something just put out there just as a safety, just as a little extra precaution. Otherwise, I'm trying to think of anything else I've missed here. It's really a quite a beautiful property, very good views, and they've had some small scale events and had some success. So they've been very forthcoming that they think they'll do more than 15, and the events could range from weddings to different receptions. Again, I do have one picture from the interior of the house, not included here, but the house is very looks like it would accommodate a wedding party or something like that very nicely. So that's all I have on that. Any questions for me or?
Okay, any questions from the Planning Commission for Ligon?
I don't have, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I have to recuse myself from this case because this property is neighboring mine.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think kind of building on what Mike said earlier, this sounds like, well, this is what the event venue was put in for, attracting tourism, attracting that kind of business. Okay, I think this is the very early stages on this. And as you can see from Mr. Helmut's project, they may need to be providing us quite a bit more information when we start looking at this in more detail. Yeah.
You mean the last one?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah,
We've got all.
Yeah. Any question at all for Ligon? Is the applicant here?
She was not able to make tonight. They were not able. They have a place they live in Pennsylvania, and they're going to be back there, but they will definitely be at the May.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this case? Okay. Well, I guess it's good that we got started looking at it right now. So,
Yep.
And like this one also, you're planning on at least the 2 workshops.
This one and the next one, then will be the June 4th public hearing.
Okay. Thank you. All right. If there's no question for Ligon on that, then let's move on.
So I think it's June 1st. Excuse me, June 1st. public
Okay.
hearing.
All right. Case number SU 06-22-15. Maynard Ramos has applied for a special use permit to operate a welding shop on a 4.4 acre A1 agriculture zone parcel. In the A1 zoning district, welding shops are allowable by special use permit. The proposed shop would operate from an existing accessory structure located on the parcel. The parcel contains a dwelling addressed as 3090 Shelby Road, Madison, Virginia. The parcel is identified on Madison County tax maps as 55-16. Okay, Ligon?
Yes, very similar to the request we had a little less than a year ago on Seville Road. This is an existing structure. Mr. Ramos has a pretty successful fabrication welding shop in Charlottesville. He's done very well. And I guess, I don't know if this is really an expansion, but he wants to serve Madison County. My understanding is that particular structure has, it's, from best I can tell, maybe some of you know, but I believe that structure has been there for quite a while. It is sort of like the last garage we had. We do not have a permit on it, and it might just be because it's been there so long. It's a steel fabricated structure, and just to look at it, it's substantial. We do have a permit at one time that was pulled for some electrical work, but we don't have the original garage permit. So I explained to Mr. Ramos that we would need a engineer or architect certification on the building, and he would also need a bathroom. That's when it comes to garages, as we know, that's sort of the big necessity for a public garage / in this case welding shop. He had asked about the potential for a pump and haul, and I did talk to Emily Borden from the health department about that possibility. Exactly how does that work? We do have some in the county, but the way she described it is that with a pump and haul system that can work. But essentially, if I understood her correctly, and I think I did, is that the pump and haul system, the responsibility lies with the county. If for some reason it's not maintained, it would be the county's responsibility. Now, I have every belief that he would maintain it, but I guess the strong preference would probably be for a conventional septic. There is a house on the site. I don't know if that could be you. Does that rent at the house? That is okay. So someone lives there. One of the big conditions that I told them that, obviously the bathroom, there is an area kind of behind to the sort of behind the existing garage that's sort of flat, is putting a fenced in area, maybe I don't know what the dimensions would be, but large enough to accommodate any vehicles that are waiting to be worked on or picked up. So a fenced in area that would sort of obstruct the view of vehicles, and come with a number out front. You can see the picture sort of out in the front. Just say, look, no given time, you'll have more than, I don't know, just say 5 cars or 6 cars, whatever that number may be, sort of out front. Everything else would be kept in that sort of storage lot that's fenced in. And he didn't think that seemed to be fine with him. So we've got a good start of thinking about the conditions. So engineer certification, you're going to need a bathroom. It looks like that will be a traditional septic. And we will send VDOT for the recommendations, but the existing entrance is pretty wide, and this has good sight distance in both directions. So I don't think there's any question there. And historically, I don't know if it's been informal or not. I know, this has been used for some sort of a garage storage. So I think if it is formalized, it gets a SUP. The good news is we can sort of put some conditions on maintaining that the property sort of stays in an orderly fashion, and only so many cars out front at any given time. And Mr. Ramos seemed totally okay with that as a condition.
Okay, any questions from the planning commission?
Leland, I know at one time this was a welding shop. It was Taylor's welding shop.
Okay.
Because he worked on stuff for me, and I know that he was there. Does the house belong to the property that the welding shop is? Because the reason I'm asking, he's gonna have, 4 or 5 people use the bathroom in a period of a day? If his existing system, and he owns the property, is there, and Danny can speak to this more than me, a grinder pump, and he could probably have it certified, we could put it in the same system. You're not talking about a lot of people visiting the shop every day, maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. He'll just have to go pull the septic permit and see what it's approved for. But my thought is until he gets it installed, and if you can use that, that's great. But he could use a temporary bathroom like we sort of did with the one on Seville, until we can get but that's something we definitely can look at and see if we can use that existing one. That's a good idea. I don't see any if the health department's okay with it, then that would be great. Yep.
Any other? Mike?
Is this auto repair as well? It said the sign on it, the big sign on the front there says auto repair. Is that auto repair?
Well, it says welding fabrication. Do you think you do some auto repair there? Okay. Right. So, okay. So we'll keep
I
it.
think that was from the previous person, Mike.
Yeah.
What's that?
That sign.
That
was
sign,
from the
okay.
Previous person.
I don't think so.
But he's not thinking in terms of brakes and tires and oil changes. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah, I mean, we had that question. I said, because it's really no problem. I mean, it's, if you're doing fabrication, if you
right.
put in, but if you want to also use auto shop, but he's been pretty clear that,
He's also aware of some of the, other than the bathroom, that there may be like hazardous materials conditions and things like that. You've
right. I mean, I
spoken
told
to him.
there was a stove in there, and the little I do know that I explained to him that I know that wouldn't be allowed under the building code. So he will get the engineer just looking at it, and I don't, I mean, it's a steel frame structure. It looks pretty solid. I couldn't imagine there'd be a lot of, changes would have to make to the building. But again, the architect will have to look at it and certify that.
And that is one of the conditions.
That will be one of the conditions.
Until there's another question, just out of curiosity, am I actually seeing 3 different addresses on this parcel?
No, the GIS does that sometimes.
Okay.
The other one should be on 5516A, probably over 30 feet, but sometimes it'll.
Okay, and
it'll
then
do
there's
that.
one right by the road, it looks like
Right.
here.
I think that one of those accessory structures is addressed. It might be this one, actually. I'll check with Brian Daniels.
Okay. Has there been any discussion about buffering from the road so that, this is not as visible from the road?
Yeah, that's the whole idea. Maybe just putting a number of the cars that could be visible
No, I
from
mean,
the road.
the building itself. I mean, if this is, it looks like this is closer to the road than the house is.
Yeah, the second, the first structure is, this second structure is off the road.
It's been there forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that if Mr. Ramos intends anything that goes beyond the scope of what you would expect in a welding shop,
Mhm.
that he include those uses in his special use permit application. That way we avoid trying to fashion a special use permit for what the applicant actually wants.
Mhm. Okay. Any other question for Ligon?
I just have one. You said the building would need to be certified by an architect
Or engineer, right.
or an engineer. That wouldn't be done by Madison, like Jamie wouldn't do.
No, because this is just a process. When something has been constructed that either didn't get a permit, we've had a few ag buildings that people turn around and use for something else.
Sure.
He just says it, that's an engineer have to go look at it, and sometimes they have to dig around the footer of the foundation to see how if the concrete meets code. But
Okay. I was really just asking.
right, yeah.
Partly
yeah.
because I didn't want to write down architect when it was somebody else. So, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Ligon?
Was there a limit? What was the limit that was put on the Reynolds bill?
As far as
Amount of cars.
I think
Was there a limit?
I think there was. I have to look at it. I think it was something like 20 more storage at one time. I forget. Yeah, but we did put a limit on the number. Yep.
Okay. Any other question for Ligon? All right. Does the applicant wish to address the board? No. All right. Any public comment on this? Okay. Thank you. All right. That brings us to our old business. And let's see what's our time looking like here. We're not doing too badly. Okay. We have 3 additional items under old business. I guess we'll just go down the list. Peter, would you fill us in on the work that your committee has been doing with the short-term rental and accessory dwelling unit ordinances?
Yeah, I would say at the outset, these 2 issues were on separate tracks. We've had a couple of workshops, February and March, on the short-term lodging unit definition, which was an idea that Ligon came up with and that we looked at. And then more recently, we were asked by the board through CARDI to look at the issue of ADUs. We have had one committee meeting on that issue, and I sent around a memo to everybody on the commission introducing that subject. But the reason we need to look at these together tonight is that they're incompatible on their face. The definition of short-term lodging unit pretty accurately describes what an ADU is. And it is similar to the ADU definition, which is in the memo that I circulated on April 10. And in that memo, we recommend tentatively and subject to our first discussion of the ADU unit that rental of ADUs be only on a long-term basis. So we're going to have to address that as a threshold issue because the two definitions cannot stand independently as they are now written. One possibility would be to limit short-term lodging to the primary property on a parcel and make it of right in both A1 and C1, and that any ADU as defined that was not part of the primary dwelling unit, but rather was either part of an accessory building on the property or a standalone building would be available only for long-term rentals. And by long-term rentals, we have tentatively defined that as 90 days or more. So why don't, as those of you who have thoughts on this subject, express them. Why don't we start with Mike, and we'll just go down the line and see who has comments.
No additional comments.
Okay. James?
No additional comment.
Steve?
No, I see your point about the problem where they might be overlapping, but I'm not sure how to deal with that right now. So.
Okay, Nathan?
I'll pass.
Francoise?
Good job putting everybody on the spot.
Faye
I
has an
wanted to
idea.
clarify something. That's why I
Okay.
don't want to let it go without clarifying. Excuse me. To me, I don't understand. I mean, all right, I guess I'll ask the question this way. Are you saying that an accessory ADU, accessory dwelling unit, has to be rented?
Has to be what?
Rented.
No, it doesn't have to be rented. In fact, the more likely use of it would be for
A residence for another residence.
As I say, they're typically, an ADU is typically used to accommodate family members, caregivers for senior homeowners, nannies for young children, house guests, home-based workers, and long-term renters. And that is consistent with the literature that I've read about ADUs.
Well, I guess then, all right, so that it doesn't clarify too much, if we're, now this definition is not in our ordinance right now.
Right, neither one of them are.
Okay, so to me, the short-term rental part is very clear. It's like could be an air listed on Airbnb or all that. Okay, that to me is a total separate thing. The ADU is, I think, even my committee meeting, we were kind of using it loosely, and it's not what we really intended. To me, that's just another place for somebody to live, not rented necessarily.
Well,
So
it
I
could
don't
be rented
even-
though.
Huh?
It could be rented.
Well, anything could be rented.
And
Rent a
it
house
wouldn't
out.
necessarily need to be rented, but one of the uses of an ADU traditionally has been rentals. And you can see if you build a mother-in-law's suite out in the
Yeah, I know.
backyard, and mother-in-law dies, and you have a building out there, and you're likely to want to use it, and you would rent it under those
Yeah, well, the
circumstances.
mother-in-law dies and you have a son that needs a home, so you put him in there.
If you don't have a son, or he doesn't want to live in the same
Yeah, I'm not
property
sure.
with
That's
his parents.
confusing to me. Can't we just have a definition of ADU as residential living unit on the same parcel as a single family dwelling? Or, add a little bit to it there, like you say. I think we were too much in the weeds there. It looks to me like we could have a very simple definition of it. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't read on it like you
But
have.
that doesn't solve the incompatibility issue.
Well, because you're tying what? Because you're tying ADU into rentals?
Right.
But we don't have to.
We don't have to permit them to be rentals. But if you have your mother-in-law suite out in the backyard, and she dies, you're going to want to do something with it. And if you get to the point that you're retired, you need income, and you've got this nice little ADU out in the backyard, you're probably going to rent it, and that would be a logical step
Well, I
to take.
understand that, but I mean, that's speaks to me of another kind of way we would want to address use of our buildings, period. Any building, any house, any part of a house.
Can I throw in?
So I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, I'm
it,
sort
but-
of, I don't mean to jump in here, but on the short-term rentals, just to look at that, that look to me looks great. The only comment that I had is that, and I think Peter said that, he thought no issue there, is combining
Mhm.
the 2 and 3, just to say that it has to register with the Commissioner of Revenue and remits transaction tax. So from my perspective,
I agree.
short-term rental that's great. If everyone is in agreement that combining in the definition 2 and 3, just to a number 2. So that one looks good.
Yeah, the way I would reword number 2 is registers with the Commissioner of Revenue and remits transient occupancy taxes to the commissioner.
Okay. So if I move on to the ADU,
Mr. Work, but before we go further, where are the definitions that we're changing in agenda item 5A? Are they listed here? I'm just not finding them.
Well, Ligon had sent out a prior memo, and I sent out to the Planning Commission and to Ligon the March 18 memo that we wrote.
Okay, so this is in reference to the March 18 memo rather than the April 10, 2022 material in the packet. I was having a
Well,
hard
the
time
April,
finding it.
the April 10 memo is
Is
the ADU memo, and does not deal with short-term lodging unit.
Okay, and I guess my question is, do we have the short-term rental in the packet for tonight? We do.
Yeah, it's on the back.
On the back.
No, it's right here. It's the
Item
first
5A.
5A. It's right here. 5A. Then well, this one has continued. So 5A has two topics, sort of.
My mistake. Very good. Thank you.
So and there is a definition there, right?
I have a question.
Yes.
So in the short-term lodging unit definition, it says, refers to single family, blah, 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 or an accessory structure. Do you mean an accessory dwelling unit?
No, an accessory structure would be something like a garage.
Okay, because otherwise, you can
Right.
turn around and have part of the accessory dwelling unit, and part of that would be rentable to short term, which we do not want to have.
Well,
Because that's,
again, we have to solve this problem. Do we want to make what are essentially ADUs available for short-term rental? And at least the tentative view of our committee, and I think Cardy and Ligon, is no, we don't.
Yeah, I don't like ADUs for short term. Long term's fine, but not short term.
Yeah, because remember, it's being introduced for those parcels in A1 and C1 that are, in C1, it would be, in A1, it would be for parcels that are
Right.
between 3 and that 5.9 acres.
Right, too small.
That they can't do a second.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
If you have
Right.
6 or more.
You just do it and you could build a.
Right. Ligon, how about, maybe this is a potential way to look at this. The short-term lodging units, all it says is that adheres to applicable private covenants and deed restrictions. Since it's a dwelling unit, can we say it's going to be, it's required to meet the 3 acre limit requirement, 3 acre per dwelling limit requirement? So if we've got 4 of these short-term dwelling units that somebody wants to get a special use permit for, but they've got 30 acres, then they're within the size limitations for that. Whereas the ADU, they simply can't do it. They can't do that.
That's right.
So do you think it's possible that we need to say that specifically in here? Or is there something that gives us the administratively the ability to say that since this is a dwelling unit, that it must adhere to the minimum 3 acres per dwelling unit on the parcel? That would separate it from the ADU.
Yeah, so the ADU has its own set of regulations and.
Yeah, they're a special
Okay,
case. Yeah.
it's over here. A short-term rental, I'm just gonna repeat what it is, you can have, if you have a single parcel can have 1 short-term rental. Now, if you happen to have a single parcel that's 6 acres and you have 2 houses on it, only 1 would be by right. Once you have that second one, you've got to come get a special use permit.
What we've been looking at this for was a situation where we just had one. They came for a special use permit to, let's see, they had a cabin that they were going to use as a short-term rental. They had a yurt they were going to use as short-term rental.
Right.
An accessory building that they had remodeled to use as short-term rental. But they had sufficient acreage so that they didn't run afoul of the 3 acres per unit.
That's right.
And if we simply say somehow that they have to abide by the 3 acre per unit, or 5 and C1.
But you wouldn't be able to put the extra units on your parcel unless you had that acreage. So,
Right. Which I think is exactly what we intend.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think it needs to be stated because that goes back to part of the code that says you have to assign 3 acres to each dwelling. If it's a dwelling unit, whether it's,
Okay,
you
so
know,
it's clear enough that
I
a
think as
short-term
written,
rental
it's-
unit is a dwelling unit.
right.
Let me just ask Danny and Pete if they have thoughts on this incompatibility issue.
I'm putting it all together.
I'm trying to decipher it all. I'm having a very hard time.
I have one more thing to ask.
Okay.
All right, so short-term rental is very obvious to me, the term. And then you're saying long-term renters, you've mentioned here in the second, in the definition for ADU. So, and if you do not want to have short-term rentals there, first of all, we should say that when we write it up. Right now, it's just the definition needs to be refined, but we need to.
Yeah, I can codify this and take this and make it pretty.
So that we,
what-
right, and
what-
then the other thing, but that's fine. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that right now. It's fine. And who's going to monitor this and all this? Whether short-term or
so-
long-term and all that good
Yeah,
stuff?
if somebody was to come in and get, we're going to build, I mean, this is by special use permit, right? The ADU. This is something that, if you look at where allowed, A1 zoning district, one ADU that is part of an existing or planned single-family dwelling is allowable by right in A1 zoning district. Okay? This second B says one ADU that is detached structure or part of existing or planned accessory structure on parcels between 3 and 5.9 acres, 3.59 acres is allowed by special use permit in the A1 zoning district. A confuses me a little bit because it seems to say that it's by right. I would say B is what we want for A1. We
Well,
want,
but
Yeah, A is, it's by right because it's already there in
yeah,
the code. in the
it is
ordinances.
there in the code
Yeah.
and, but 1A, just as C1, applies only to an ADU that is part of an existing or planned single-family dwelling.
okay. I'm sorry. Okay. So,
See?
okay. So if it's attached or part of a,
Of an existing or planned
okay,
primary dwelling unit,
okay,
then it's by right. One of them is by right.
okay,
Think of it as an addition.
okay. If you want to build an addition,
Yeah.
But if you want to build a
And separate.
standalone ADU or make it part of a garage apartment or something like that, you have to get a special use permit for that
okay, that,
in both A1 and C.
okay. I think that's,
In C1, you allow one use per 10 acres, correct?
C1 is 1 acre, 1 per 10 to 19.9 acres. Anything in that range.
Yeah, so if they've got less than 20, then they need.
Special use permit.
right. You need to get a special use permit if it's separate.
But if it's part of the primary dwelling unit, you can get one as of right, by right, in both A1 and C1.
I mean, to a certain degree now, if it's attached to if it's attached to the existing dwelling, I mean, we would just consider that addition if you had to add. So to a certain degree, it's allowable. So I don't see any problem with that. I'm glad you explained it to me. I guess the only question that I have about this would be putting some language that's clear about if they can be a short-term rental.
Absolutely.
So it sounds to me,
If we put that in,
He's got it in here.
if we put in the
Number
requirements
9.
and restrictions.
So
It's already in here.
okay, it's in there. I'm sorry.
It's in
Okay,
there,
all right.
yeah.
It cannot be a short-term rental.
All right, so it could not, okay.
Yes.
Well, we'll work on this.
Yeah. Mr.
And
Chairman, I just like to say, if you look at Peter's heading here, he says, so this is a draft outline for ADU ordinance provisions. So he.
It's not the ordinance itself.
Correct.
It's just a
Right.
draft
We shouldn't be
outline.
looking at this as this is the ordinance. This is just the draft outline to answer the questions to draft an ordinance.
Right.
Right, and before the next workshop,
Right.
we'll have another committee meeting and we'll try to actually draft some ordinance language.
If it would be okay, I can draft something, give to you, Peter. How it
Sure,
would
I'd be
how it
happy
would-
to have your input.
How it would be codified, how I would recommend it be codified.
Sure.
And then y'all can take it to committee, look at it, we can talk about it next May. But I think we're all in general agreement how these two ordinance will.
Well, no, I don't think we are.
Well, do you,
I don't think
Of
we are
course.
with regard to the short-term lodging unit.
Oh,
Do
My
you-
only concern was that initially it was confusing, but if you put this in and put in the restriction 9, then it does it. It fixes it.
yeah, if we can make the assumption then that the short-term rental units, whatever size they are, wherever they're located, all have to meet that minimum 3 acres per unit on the
Mhm.
property, then I think that might solve the tension between the two. You think so?
I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
I know too.
That's an A1.
Yeah,
You gotta
well,
address C1.
well, yeah, but you still have the same situation. You've got a number of acres per dwelling
Right.
unit. So,
Anyway, the committee will try to address and resolve these issues, and we'll report back at the next workshop with
Yeah.
hopefully language that could be adopted if everyone agreed.
Yeah, and I'll send something that y'all can look at. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
got one more thing real quick on this that I want the committee to think about is I don't know that I like short-term rentals in R1 and R2. There's been a lot of discussion in other counties about, R1 and R2, they're more dense. And, if you look at the statement of intent under R1 and R2 to establish, provide quiet, low-density residential facilities such as commercial are considered inappropriate. And everything I've read on the other counties, they are not allowing short-term rentals, i.e., all the
Yeah,
Airbnbs and stuff in R1 and R2.
I
So
think
just would y'all look into that?
I think that's what Peter, well, in
Yeah,
my
we
copy,
will.
that's what he
Yeah.
says.
Are there already some of that?
But shall not be permitted in R1 and R2.
No,
More than one. You can't have but one in R1.
it says one such short-term lodging unit on a single parcel shall be a by right use in C1, A1, and R1 and R2 zoning districts.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I say, let's reconsider that.
Yeah, we'll
Okay,
discuss
I
that.
see.
Come
Yeah,
back.
I would say that Cardy's right, that is, I know in Luray, we don't allow it in R1, with our kind of our, smaller, the R1 district. But I do believe we probably have some operating in R1. So if that was adopted, I think you'd have people coming in saying, could you please change that? So just as an FYI, that'd be my only, yeah. And 95% of the county's land use is A1, C1, but just for information.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Good job.
All right, let's see, somewhere under all of this, I have the rest of it.
Yep.
I like that.
You're all night waiting on this thing.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Faye,
No,
would
I'm
you
not gonna take 2 hours.
kind of run us through real quickly
All
what
right,
you got?
I'll
so
try to
far?
do it quickly. It hadn't been a quick thing though.
Right.
First thing I want to mention is that our committees met and they've had a lot of input on various things, and getting the wording right is sometimes challenging, and Mr. Craig has weighed in. I just want to point out one thing. Mr. Craig was kind enough to make sure that I had the the revised version of the orange one, which we love so much, all red. They rethought everything,
Mhm.
totally rethought everything, which was very helpful to me. So thank you very much.
Well,
And our
there's somebody
committee.
on that committee, and they told me yesterday, they just threw it out.
Right. So we have to be careful what we copy from other people and make sure it suits us and what we really want. So you've got a lot of verbiage here with the, you've got a lot of verbiage here. The regular print in this is what's in here now. It helped us to see what was here. There are a few places where will was changed to shall, on the very first page, which is page 1 at the bottom on this section. Okay, this is like mine. Well, it's got some extra stuff in it. But anyway, the 3 dots under the plat of any subdivision with a private road shall show such road and refer to any applicable legal documents that establish such road. Now, Mr. Gray, would you just make sure, what are the legal documents we need for the road we're talking about?
Typically, it is the subdivision plat itself that shows where the road is and designates specifically where the road is. Some of you are familiar with what was drawn for Leathers Lane. It shows a road that is designated and specified.
Ooh.
That's really all of that refers to.
Right. And that's, does it refer at all to who owns it?
Well, and again, the real challenge with most of these subdivisions is that we would probably want the owners on each side to own, to the center point of the road. And the reason for that is then that makes it clear that the county is not the owner of it, and the county does not have to do anything with it. And then, each owner of the property would be the owner to the center line, but is subject to the right of the people in the subdivision and, to the general public to use that road. Now, that's another element. Since most of these private roads are not through roads, they don't really need to be connected to anything, and they wouldn't typically be connected. So the users of the road are typically the people who live in the neighborhood.
Becomes very, very complicated. And it becomes very complicated when you try to spell out some of the things that we want. Basically, if you'll turn to page 2, we are looking at, right now we have 4 lots, and we changed the word lots to dwelling units, not ADUs, just dwelling units, just houses.
How is that gonna affect that?
What do you mean? Well, they can have 8 now.
Dwelling unit though, right? An ADU is gonna be a dwelling unit. Is that gonna be counted as one or not?
It won't be an accessory. No, it's just another house. They can sell 3 acres of land or whatever, right? Or what?
I'm just curious, what?
Our committee didn't want to use the word lots.
Is there an aversion to using the word house?
We can use
for
house.
Dwelling unit?
I
And I'm
think
just
house
trying
is
to picture
fine.
what else it might be.
I can't imagine either. We were thinking dwelling unit is a house. So, I mean, house is certainly, I really would prefer to have everything a whole lot simpler. So everybody that reads this knows exactly what we're talking about. I agree. So house, dwelling unit would be a house. We don't really have that in here. We have a lot of things in there. So that's one thing. We can move on that and we can change that, but not an ADU, just a house.
I don't mean to interrupt. I don't think we have a definition for house.
We don't have house.
We do for dwelling unit though.
See, we don't have house defined.
I
We don't know
usually
what
do
house
dwelling
is.
unit, just for what it's worth, but either way.
I can live with dwelling unit. It's a different world.
But not ADU, just house. Okay, so, and mainly what we're after really, as we try to clarify later, are the driveways from these individual homes that abut to the private road that goes connecting one to the other as it goes through. That's what we're really looking at. Like, a private road comes in and one house is here and one house is over here. And then, so we address the extension and all a little bit later. So basically what we're saying is allowing 8. Up to 8 now. We have 4 now. We're allowing up to 8. So we're expanding that. That may or may not require an extension of the said private road. It may or may not. It could be along the private road. So we're talking about extension and addition of. If you move on to page 3, the first thing we want to, the committee is trying to establish, which I understand from the county, what they'd like to see, are road standards for our private drives. So what we have said in this, right under the red part, the first red part, that's the easiest place to look. We are stating some reasons why, don't need them really, that the design of the said road will be by a certified engineer shall be required. This requirement includes family subdivisions. Okay, any questions on that? So first thing is, the aim is that eventually, this is for new, okay? Maybe we need to stay that. New driveways, we can automatically require that. I think I need to put in new.
This on road standards that.
Under road standards, the very first red thing. So bottom, the design of said road by a certified engineer shall be required. This requirement includes family subdivisions. And then under that, the extension of a newly added dwelling unit or business abutting the existing private road shall require a certified engineer to design the upgrade of the existing road. That's where we get into trouble a little bit. But now, it applies also to the road maintenance agreement, which will be fine for on a new road. That'll be fine. Everybody coming in, they have the road maintenance agreement they sign automatically. It's about the existing one, okay? The existing road, which is going to have added roads. It's added drives, added dwelling units, adding whatever. Now, we're just saying that it has to be required to serve by to design and the upgrade of the existing road. Now, I asked Mr. Gregg again about how legally can we require everybody to sign that's already on this road. That's what this is dealing with. And if you leave it just that it shall be required, Mr. Gregg, what did you tell me about, or what's your ideas on how we get people, what happens in a situation like that?
Well, if you're going to be subdividing your property to add these new roads, you would require those people to bring the road into compliance. And that may sound onerous, but that's the way it is done typically. And the reason for that is because the people who are benefiting typically are the ones who are subdividing their property. And I've been on the harsh end of that standard on more than one occasion. And in some cases, it has made economic sense for me to build a better road. In other cases, it has not. And I've made that determination. The real question, I think that y'all need to consider is, as you build these roads, is there an objective standard? And, you want to avoid the hodgepodge that we have in some of our neighboring counties, some of which have roads that are absolutely horrible. You use this vehicle, so to speak, as a way to improve all of your roads. So if somebody's going to add something, say, okay, good, you're going to add a lot or 2 lots, whatever it might be, that it suddenly is, an extension. Say, congratulations, you get to expand the road and improve the road.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, something that does concern me with this draft, and I'll just touch on it now, engineers design to different standards.
Right. Now that's,
and just saying a certified engineer, a certified engineer can tell me my river is sufficiently low that I don't need a bridge over it.
well,
And that's a standard. And if an engineer says that, is that something
Well-
that the county is going to allow?
well, that's the point. What do we want to allow? Because if we obviously Orange didn't get it through, and I haven't found anybody else yet that has standards for roads that are general and meet all of the different kinds of land. I know in our committee, we talked about the fact that different kinds of roads have different kinds of not only topography, but and I have an example right at my house, not mine, but another road right next door where there's a sloping hill coming down to it that washed it out. So if you don't have that and you're on flat surface, you don't need the same kind of, you need a good road with a good base and all that, but it may be requiring a different kind of engineering on it. So who does design a road? That's, maybe tell me who it would be and we'll put it in. Then it will be,
Well,
what you're
again,
saying,
It's not, if you wanted to, have Marvin Hinchy design all of the roads in Madison County, I'm sure he would appreciate the work. But the idea is, if you don't have an objective set of standards, and I don't know if VDOT has any standards for lower quality roads. Orange County tried to put something in and the developers over there balked, which is why they threw it out. That doesn't mean it was a bad ordinance. It just means that the developers in Orange County did not like that ordinance. It might be that you consider softening some of the standards that Orange County put in, but I think if you leave it to the discretion of somebody who, passed the professional engineer's exam to design a road, you are possibly in worse shape than you are now.
well, and I understand that. So we were using that word as being, a certified engineer as being somebody competent and would get the road, get the road.
Understand there's a
So
licensing
that is
standard for
something.
engineers, the PE stamp, and Mr. Elliott can certainly speak to this, as can Mr. Krigler. If you have that, and you probably see them. If you see a PE stamp, that is considered authority in many ways. The problem is you design different things to different standards. That's the reason that the Orange Airport has shorter runways than Dulles
Well,
than
it's a
Dulles
usage, yeah.
International.
But
And the same thing is true with roads. Some roads serve Dulles, other roads serve Orange.
so, I don't know that we are qualified to write the road standard, and I haven't found anything yet that,
My idea and how it's done, is that you sort of submit the agreement. This is my subdivision. I'm doing, say it's new. I'm going to subdivide this and put 3-acre lots up to 8. I'm going to submit a maintenance agreement that's also going to detail what is being maintained as a gravelled road, graded, gravelled with, that would just be part of the agreement that's provided and would detail what's being constructed.
but I need to get back to standards. What are the standards then?
You can't, excuse me, you can't set a set of standards because the topography of the land and the quality of the land is entirely different. You may go somewhere that you need 18 inches of stone, and you may go out here in a red cornfield somewhere that's got really good soil and you need 6 inches. How do you put a standard in place?
That was our point. There's not one standard.
He's supposed to do that.
That's what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how much we have to second guess who we trust to inspect or build or whatever. I don't know. Where does that credibility come then? I understand your point, and it scares me very much.
But that's when you put in a third-party inspector.
Oh,
We could have a third-party inspector come in and approve it once it's done.
I suppose you could require that. And then the question is, who chooses the third-party inspector?
who pays you?
Well,
It would necessarily be an engineer.
Yeah.
But who is the, presumably the developer would pay for the engineer. But I think that we would probably want the county to have the opportunity to select the engineer to make sure that we're getting the road we actually need.
right. And
It might be a good idea, sort of cut you off, might be a good idea to get Matt Ayler to talk a little bit about this, or maybe sit down with him, because, he's getting erosion sediment plan permits all the time for people who are constructing, driveways and private road subdivisions. Maybe he could fill us in on what would be.
that would be fine. I'll
Why
end
would
it.
the county inspect it? The county is-
We don't have
I
anybody.
mean, we do it now.
Expertise
We
to
do.
do that.
We do what we do,
Right.
but you got to have the standard before you start to build the thing.
Well, there is a standard for the grading and the graveling. Like I said, if someone comes in with a 4-lot subdivision, and we've had several, and they build a road, they have to get a E&S permit, submit plans, and we would inspect it. And that would be the same process,
Are there
But it's one
standards?
way to truly tell if you don't have the county doesn't have the capability of compaction equipment or whatever.
Right.
It's called a dump truck and a proof roll. And that'll tell you what you got.
Mhm. Yeah,
See,
you know about it.
One of the problems that we encountered very early on was most of the standards, or at least the ones we saw, they attempted to set standards based on the number of users.
That was
And
orange.
that was orange, I'm pretty sure, which didn't take into account anything about the topography, the type of land, what kind of conditions it would be in. So I think that's what, one of the things they were
And-
looking at.
You know, a suggestion is looking at what Highland County may have in place. Some of our friends in Southwest Virginia that have comparable terrain issues that we face here. I mean, I'm not certain Orange County would be comparable to Madison County. It's a little flatter, you know, and I'm not certain Greene would be for the same reason, although there are some areas of Greene. And one reason I think these standards are so important is because I've driven on some back roads in Greene County that are woefully maintained. And a lot of it was because they were poorly designed at the outset.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do as we go through this, upgrade everybody along the way as we get, like, increasing the numbers. I can look into it.
If you don't believe
and-
me, go to Dogwood Valley subdivision in Greene County.
Yeah.
I mean, EMS vehicles cannot get up there. I mean, it's a real crisis for those folks.
Anyway, that's what we're trying to do. Figure out the standards. I did talk with Brian Gordon. I talked with Troy Coppage, who's fire department. And I heard from NOAA. Nobody has any standards for anything. They just want to be able to get their vehicles out.
Right.
Like an EMS vehicle is 96 inches long, and fire truck, I know they're the one fire truck that they would normally take, Troy says, is 30,000 pounds. We don't have a ladder truck. If we did, that'd be 85,000 pounds. What else did I learn? A lot of things.
And
They want to be able to get their
break an
vehicles
accident.
in without having them get mired in the mud or in a hole or falling through the road. Whatever happens. So they want something, and they would like to have ideally really good. So we're back to that. There's no standards.
Well,
so
and in
they
that
know.
regard, I'll put it out to the Brain Trust, that is the Local Government Association of Virginia,
Mhm.
and see if any
Okay.
counties have that. You can probably do an index search on MuniCode to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, I did.
And I understand Mr. Elliott's concern. I mean, we don't want to make it impossible for people to build roads. At the same time, we want to make sure that, I won't pick on any universities anybody attended, but if we get somebody who, you know, took an engineering class from me and says that they're a certified engineer, that's going to pass muster.
Right.
You know, that's kind of where it is. Now, as a practical matter, a lot of our road builders around here, they know what the standards are. They know what to put in. The challenge, though, is we want to have something enforceable. Orange County had a subdivision where the developer went in as cheaply as possible, put in a terrible road. It's on the sort of the mid-eastern part of the county near the Spotsylvania line. And the roads are horrible. You know, I mean, people cannot sell their properties in there because they have, you know, basically drainage ditches in the middle of the road that were formed because that's where the water wanted to go.
Well,
That's what we want to avoid.
We'll work on how to word the standards a little bit more. But the main thing to remember that we want to try to put in here is that when we extend the road, now, if we have a road, we can go back and change any private roads that are private roads and no change is made. And that's just the way it is. You live with it. What triggers upgrading is either extension of the road where a person selling land, like you mentioned, is selling more land that extends the road, like on the farms, or where he has the land, or a developer comes in, say on an existing road even, and buys land in the back or, you know, further down. That would
And
include
the
any.
other element of that, don't forget, is if I own the very first lot and I've got 10 acres and I decide to divide that into 2 lots, then I've got to make the
All
same
right.
improvements on the road.
Right.
That would
So,
be an addition.
right. So we're trying to take care of the extension of or newly added dwelling unit. Okay, house. Then then the other thing that has to come along with this that we're trying to write in and make sure is the road maintenance agreement. Has to be a road maintenance agreement is what we're saying. We hope will become the ordinance. Easy on the new private roads, no problem. You know, that's the way it is when you have the new roads. I did list, if you look on page 4, I listed 6 things that seem to be very specific. The committee was wanting to know, without giving them a road, we don't want to have to supply the road maintenance agreement. They come to us with the road maintenance agreement designed, but these are the kind of things, the 6 things that we've mentioned, are the things that have to be included in this road maintenance agreement. The minimum, this is minimum now. In the approval of it, we may require more things in the road maintenance agreement. That's why we need the standard, going back to that. Minimum, the one thing I did find that I thought was pretty much tackled the, use the word certified engineer again. Number C, the responsibility for construction, repair, and maintenance of the private access road shall be shared equally or in specified percentages for dwelling unit owners abutting said roads. Now, they can put that in, and if it's 0 on the first one, because he's not going to pay, or the third one who's already been there, not going to pay, it's the percentages go up. That's all to be determined by our friends, the lawyers, who will be working out this thing and get that.
By whom?
The lawyers.
By who's
Our
lawyers?
wonderful lawyers. You have to have
It'll never get done.
Oh, yeah, well. Anyway, there's no other way. Oh, the owner, if he can get everybody to agree, or he says, I'll pay it all. Didn't you say you wrote a road maintenance agreement not too long ago that the owner paid, the new developer, the new person paid for it all?
Right, he put in 2 additional houses. The other owners wouldn't sign. So he is responsible for all of the road maintenance.
So that's it.
Now, it's already a paved road. The road's in reasonably good shape. One reason he did that is because there are no particular standards he has to follow. And
it was easy.
Knowing this guy, I'm pretty sure that he's never repaving it. That just, of course, that won't happen for 5 or 10 years.
So anyway, it does allow for some specificity if they want to do it, or else they do it themselves. Like you said earlier, it's up to the owner, developer, whomever is extending or adding. But that would be the road maintenance agreement too, once you get to that point. And I do the same thing now. Number 2 on the page 4 at the bottom, actually what's printed in your packet is not, that's too long. I had changed that because we can't force anybody to sign anything. And what I did was take out, and I'm not sure why that didn't happen that way. We're not going to require that. We cannot require this of all owners on the dwelling units abutting. We just can't. So you put in that it has to be, how did I say it? A road, let's see, extension of or addition to of a new dwelling unit or business abutting existing private drive. Road maintenance agreement, in addition to upgrade of the private road, shall be required for an extension of a private road. And this is for now existing roads or any addition of a driving. In other words, we leave it open.
One concern with this, and this is a detail for y'all to consider, there are going to be some people who don't want more than 4 houses on their road.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you are not giving those people veto power. In other words, don't require them to sign off. Just say that if the owners of the new lots are undertaking all of the road maintenance, then they don't need the consent or the approval of the people, closer to the public road.
So that will be arranged by them.
Well, it could be arranged by them, but
We're not
but I
requiring
don't
that.
think we want to put in as a standard that everybody on
That's
the
right.
road signs.
Right.
Otherwise, we're going to have people
And I
shooting each
agree.
other.
I agree. So we have to take that out. We really don't want that there. Okay? So some of you that said, by all the owners or whatever, yeah, that would be ideal, but that's not something that we can enforce. We want an enforceable, legally enforceable thing as best we can. So,
I think you have some questions there.
all right.
I got some questions for Sean, and we've talked about these questions in the committee. And the first thing that we addressed that you talked about was Madison County. You would own to the center of the road, that way Madison County wouldn't be responsible for the road. I understand that and understand why. My question is, let's say that the guy's gonna put 8 houses in this road, and he's building this road to state standards. And when he starts to sell the lots, he's selling the lots to the center of the road. Now he gets the subdivision finished and he wants to turn it over to the state, but the people on the center of the road, will the state take it then?
The state can take it in that circumstance. Now, the state typically is not taking that many roads, particularly in rural areas. They just don't have the budget for it. But setting aside that issue, the Commonwealth of Virginia maintains lots of roads where the owners on each side, own to the center of the road. What you can do, and it would be subject to the, planned unit development, the typical subdivision documents, that if the roads are taken into the state system, the area designated on their plat will be turned over, and the surveyor can make a designation on the plat that upon approval, the land within the 50-foot right-of-way will will transfer automatically to the Commonwealth of Virginia.
My other question is, let's say we have 4 houses built here already on the road. And when we built this road, it was 30-foot road. Now, I own up to that road 30-foot wide. The new guy goes in and adds 4 more lots onto this road, and he's 50-foot wide. And you say, well, you got to bring the road up to standards. How do I go take that land from that man that had a 30-foot road?
You don't have the ability to do that. But remember, it's also not going to be a state maintained road if that is your circumstance. What I would and understand, this is not going to be 50 feet wide pavement. It's going to be ditching and everything to make sure it's a decent roadway, but you can tie that in, and the people on what I'm going to call the 50-foot right of way are going to have probably better experiences whenever there's a heavy rain, because the people who are before that don't have the ditching and everything that the folks further back have.
We do say several times, the ordinance already says, like on the very first page, that neither Madison County nor any other public agency shall have the obligation to maintain. We say that over and over. We don't own the private drives, and we don't maintain them. And we say that a couple of different times. And it has to be, if it's going to a state road, there are some strict provisions and whatever. So like you said, there aren't very many of them going in. State is not really anxious to take these in.
No,
Faye, I've got
VDOT is
some
underfunded
questions
now.
and comments for you when you get a chance.
All right.
With regard to the first paragraph on page 1, this only applies to the creation of a new private road in a subdivision. Is there a provision that deals with private roads that aren't part of a subdivision?
Mr. Work, those are driveways.
Pardon me?
Those are driveways. If they're only serving one house, those are
They're
driveways.
driveways.
No, but if they're serving multiple houses.
Then they're a private road.
Well, then they become private roads.
I have a
So
private
you have
road,
an
for example,
accessory
but there
dwelling.
are 2 other people that have easements on my private road.
Typically, that is a private road, and there are lots of private roads that cross other people's properties. In fact, most of them do. Where I used to live, I had a half mile across my neighbor's property.
So the answer is that there aren't provisions pertaining to private roads not part of subdivisions.
The challenge, well, some of it is kind of a definitional challenge. If it is a road serving lots that are presumably on different parcels of land, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You could make it applicable based on the number of parcels that it serves. Typically, you see it in a subdivision setting, and in fact, most of the houses that have been built are subdivisions because you need to put in a road to serve the interior lots. But there are lots of properties, and again, Leathers Lane is a perfect example. There are properties beyond the Syria Mountain Estates subdivision that use that road. And they're allowed to use that road because it is a public road, so far as, the Commonwealth of Virginia is
Okay.
concerned.
I may take this up further with you, but I want to get through my comments. Faye, just one other quick comment on that first paragraph. In the second line, I see the word final, modifying approval of the Board of Supervisors. But in several subsequent places in this, You just say approval of the Board of Supervisors.
Remember, everything except for red is already in our ordinance.
I understand, but
So are you saying we
I'm
should-
thinking maybe you ought
Well,
to
we didn't-
delete that
Our
final.
goal right now, from what I understood, was to figure out how we could do standards and how we could do road maintenance, and we increased the number to 8. That's what we did. We have not taken a look yet at the rest of the.
Okay.
I mean, I agree, there are a lot of things here. The definitions are a bit challenging to me when I read them. I don't know. I would like for it to be more consistent. Remember, all these different things were put in at various times, and there wasn't a lot of consistency with terminology. It drives me crazy because I have to go back and look. Well, what does it mean here? What does it mean over here?
When you do go back and look, take a look at the penultimate and full paragraph on that first page, where the sentence reads, the maintenance and improvement of a private road shall be the mutual obligation of landowners in the subdivision. That is declaring by county ordinance that the people on that road have an obligation. And how does that square with the fact that we recognize some people won't recognize that obligation?
I read that too. I agree.
Well, the common law does provide some insight there. Using your example, if, my lot crosses Bill Wysick's property, just to use a perfectly random example, Bill had no duty to build my road. I had a 50-foot right of way. He had no duty to build it. He had no duty to maintain it. So whatever standard I chose for that road, and it serves 3 other building lots. There are no houses on them, but it serves 3 other building lots. That was the prerogative of the people who own what is called the dominant estate under property law. The people who own the servient estate are the people who own the dirt that the road travels on. In those situations, because there are usually only 1 or 2, and it doesn't serve really a common body of people, it is incumbent upon the owners of those properties. And it's not a problem until somebody's kids decide they want dirt bikes and ATVs. But the way it works is, if I wanted to have a smooth driveway, I had to pay for it, and I paid for all of it. I didn't have to get anybody else's approval. I didn't have to get any of my neighbor's approval to use that road. Now, in my case, I didn't have any different landowners using it, but I'm aware of other situations. And there's a road in Orange that serves, I think, 14 houses on a private road. What frequently happens is the guy who has the tractor just unofficially takes care of the road, and everybody gives him whiskey at Christmas. And that's how it's worked out. Because there are lots of situations where it just gets worked out that way.
Okay, a couple more quick points. Was there a rationale for 8 vice 4, or is 8 just an arbitrary number?
I guess we could have made it 100, but we didn't. No, we want to keep it relative. Relative 4 is very limiting to a lot of land around here, and it's not even abided by right now. There are more driveways on many private roads than 4. That was made back in 1972, and I've already addressed last summer the elephant in the room about why it was even made. And I asked the question then, do we have the same attitude about trying to keep people, new homes, new people out of Madison County now like we did in 1972, which was before my time here. Not before my time, but here. So we decided, and we were under the impression that the Board of Supervisors kind of wanted it to be expanded a bit. It's coming to be a problem with 4 because our farmers and our people who own land here now are being very harmed by the fact that it's limited to 4 and they can't sell land.
I get
So we
the
just used
point
8.
about the 4, but how about
8?
is there a rationale for 8, or
Just
should it be
we thought-
6 or what?
And it could be bigger than that if it's a longer driveway. We could have put it in that way. If it's a really long private drive, maybe going down to a house way out here, like a mile long, you could have many more than 8 coming through if you wanted to sell that kind of land. So we chose 8. Some of us wanted a little bit more.
Well, we talked to a lot, I talked to a lot of the local builders and asked them what they thought would help them out. And everybody I talked to was between 8 and 10.
Right.
We need to go back and change the comprehensive plan then. Because
True.
under goal one, item number 5, it says continue enforcing the provision that a private road may serve no more than 4 lots, which use the private road for access. to
And
property.
that was,
I'm just saying, I mean, I'm not
No,
saying.
no, no,
that
we already
I'm
know
doing
that.
Whatever, I'm just saying, that's what the comprehensive.
we had to reflect what we had in the ordinance then, I guess, because I didn't help write that particular
Well,
one. That will be looked at and have to match the
So
ordinance.
we just need to change it. next
Well,
time.
that provision,
We're working on it right
And in
now.
that regard, the comprehensive plan is scheduled to be reviewed
Yes.
and revised next year.
that provision, Ligon, came from Sean's predecessor.
Right. So that's why that was done that way. So we will,
You and I discussed it at one time, as a matter of fact.
so any,
Just a
All
couple
right.
more quick ones. On your last paragraph on page 3, I'd go back and review your punctuation. You use a series of semicolons, which would be fine, but then you use a comma in the third from last line after properties. And that suggests that that only applies to that last point. So I think I'd suggest getting rid of the semicolons and maybe using commas or numbers or something like
I'm
that
sorry, where were you?
to make it clear.
What page?
Three.
That's it.
That
Three
at the
lines
bottom
at
of
the bottom.
page 3,
New
Bottom
private
of page
roads.
3.
road
road
standards is the name of the
Oh,
paragraph.
Okay. Oh, up here.
Yeah,
Okay.
down at the bottom.
You're right, I understand, right here.
Yeah. While
That-
you're looking at that, there is an advantage to using the 8, because if you use 8 and then you have a larger subdivision where they want to go with 16, that puts them into the over 15, so it has become a planned development, a PUD, a planned unit development.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so if they can go 8 and another 7 and have 2 outlets, but if they go beyond that, then they've got to go to the planned unit development.
At the top of page 4, Fay, you say drafting of a private
It
road.
shouldn't be word drafting.
Shouldn't it be design of a
Yes, it
private
should
road?
be. I missed that one.
These are editorial, I don't think.
They're just, we've got to deal with some of the terminology
Yeah.
too. I've tried to do dwelling unit versus lot, which is more ambiguous.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Yeah, drafting,
specific.
no.
And then
Well, you don't have the latest version.
finally, on page 5, 2 points in the subparagraph F, you say that failure to adequately maintain the road to allow safe navigation by all emergency services shall result in liability to be borne by the dwelling unit owners. I think that's a pretty tough provision to enforce. And
No.
Sean, you may have some ideas about that. My final point, Fay, is just another punctuation point in paragraph number 2 on that last
That's
page.
not the one I submitted. I don't know, Ligon, what you did, but that's, I don't think we needed, well, you can tell me, but number 2 is not what I have written on my.
Okay. Anyway,
Mr. Clerk, to answer your question, I think we've already taken care of this. I'm not certain we want to be in the position of imposing an additional layer of tort law on people in subdivisions. The reality is, if somebody takes an affirmative act that, if they dig a moat, to widen the channel so that, the ditch across the road makes it impassable, there may be a standard there, but having it enforceable against all of the dwelling units, I think is a real problem.
Oh,
I
this
think
is-
the better way to handle it would be simply to say that the county shall have no liability pertaining to the standards of the roads. I think that all we're worried about, it seems to me, is making sure the county doesn't have any liability. If the lot owners engage in what would be fairly bizarre behavior, that may create its own set of facts that creates some tort liability. I don't think we want to be in a position of saying, well, the road washed out near the top. So that means that all of the landowners have some responsibility because the ambulance couldn't get
But
to the dying baby or whatever it might be.
remember, that's part of the road maintenance agreement though, and it's also part of the new standards because it's going to be new roads. Can't put it in there
But
because
that
they
is
have already agreed
contractual
to
li-
it.
That is contractual liability as opposed to tort liability. And I think we want to stay away from.
So we don't
tort
say anything
issues.
about that. Nobody's responsible if,
The responsibility would be for their failure to abide by the terms of the road maintenance agreement. I'm not sure you want that to, but it's, you can certainly put it in the ordinance, but I'm not certain you want to cause people looking at houses to kind of survey their neighbors and think, well, they're not going to go do a good job on these roads. I don't want to be responsible because we have an emergency situation and the neighbors were a little casual about maintaining the road.
but under the road maintenance agreement, won't they be required to?
Again, it goes back to, and look at some of the roads we have. I mean, we
Well,
have some
well,
public
that's why we're
roads.
doing this.
Well, we have public roads that
Well, true.
really are not accessible.
We don't hold the state accountable. I know.
But, again, it's, it really has not been an area of development of tort liability standards. I'm not certain that Madison County wants to be the leading county on that.
Okay.
We certainly can be, but,
Well,
I would consider
I'll
the
research
construction
that.
science standards and go with that.
Sean, when you mentioned roads in this agreement, would that include bridges, culverts?
Absolutely. Because they're part of the passageway.
Okay, that's what I want
Right.
to make sure of.
private road, right.
And a lot of private roads. I had two culverts, crossing two creeks on the road I had to my house. And I had to maintain them. They're expensive, by the way.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other
And
comments?
one other thing that I do want to mention that I've gotten Mr. Gregg's input on, but see what you think. We've mentioned extension of an existing road. We've mentioned how we want to hopefully deal with that. And we've mentioned addition of a drive or to the private road, how we would do that, which becomes the burden of whatever. Can't expect everybody to do it. What about do we want to put anything about, well, what happens when a house on the private road gets sold? All right. To a new person. So now you have a new plat, new owner. Do we tie them in at all?
The challenge with that, if it's an existing house that is not subject to the road maintenance agreement,
Right.
you
What if
really
it's
cannot tie them in.
okay?
On the other hand, if they are purchasing a house that was, or where the house was subject to the road maintenance agreement, that covenant runs with the land, meaning that each subsequent owner of that particular lot in house is required to abide by the terms of the road maintenance agreement.
The other thing that impacts that some would be lender of money. And there's certain federal, I looked it all up and it's too much for me to remember.
And-
Certain of them require road maintenance agreement or whatever for borrowing the money. Others of them don't. So, but a lot of banks do. I know 15 years ago, it was part of somebody that I knew that.
Well, and it still is. And typically what happened, I have done a lot of real estate closings and refinances. Usually the person refinancing is stuck with the responsibility of maintaining the road because they're the ones who wanted the loan. And so they pass, that ordinance.
So, okay. So it sort of will take care of itself, maybe. Okay.
Well, lawyers refer to it and psychologists refer to it as a free rider problem. You have some people who aren't going to pay for anything. So the way you get improvements is the people who are the most motivated for the improvement, put the improvement in. I mean, I don't do a lot of swimming, so I don't have a big swimming pool. I do some fishing and I don't want to maintain a pond, so I'm friends with people who have ponds.
Okay. So anything else that
I
people,
got one question.
all right.
We've got to clearly have a road maintenance agreement. But what I'm hearing and understanding from you, I think, is there's no way to enforce it.
Well, depending on how the road maintenance agreement is written, they can be enforceable. What the county likely has an interest in doing is staying out of the, road maintenance agreement enforcement. That's part of the difficulty and challenge we have in Syria Mountain Estates. The idea is each landowner would have a private right of action against his neighbors or his recalcitrant neighbors who won't contribute their $500 a year, whatever the amount might be, for snow removal and road maintenance. They can form, and I would encourage them to form homeowners associations for the purpose of enforcing those provisions. But yeah, I mean, Mr. Elliott, to the extent your concern is members of our Board of Supervisors being called about insisting that, a private road have an additional layer of gravel and 3 of the landowners don't want to do that, I'm not certain, but I don't think all 5 of them would like to get those telephone calls.
And we had talked about that in HOAs and establishing all that. Okay.
Any other questions or comments on that?
I'll just make one, just from being on the committee. We've had a lot of meetings and Faye's put in a ton of work on this. You can call her day or night with any questions or additions to this, but
Just don't call Nathan.
she, basically we're not trying to do anything wild here. The whole idea is allow access to land, not buy a bunch of driveways popping out on these little roads, but buy a more organized, well-designed access point. And we chose the number 8. We all felt it was relatively appropriate. Setting some standards to the road, setting some standards to a maintenance agreement, and then the existing road improvement, upgrade, add additional lots units is probably the worst part of all this. But, they certainly open any input.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. And I need to go back and make sure we'll meet again and make sure the terminology, but unless we are expected to do this, the whole, subdivision, I know that you all didn't intend for us to look at all of this, did you?
You don't want to revise the whole section.
I mean, if we do, then we go back to the very first, which is already in and all that. So that's not what we have done at this point. So if you tell us to right now, we'll try to get in the road maintenance standards, road maintenance agreement, and including family subdivisions. That's another key thing. That one part. Everything else that's in our ordinances for family subdivisions we haven't touched that, except just for the road maintenance and the agreement.
Okay. Any other?
My only comment on that, I think it's a bad idea to exempt family subdivisions from road.
We're not exempting them.
Okay.
Yeah, we're including them. I say it everywhere, including.
Except
Okay. Any other questions on that?
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Just really, really quickly.
To the public, I'm sorry,
Oh.
Mr. Chairman. I think we got somebody that might want to weigh in on this one.
Anybody?
On
That's up to
the
you.
draft proposal for this?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Well, it's
Any
not
public comment?
finished. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they have anything to say, it'd be great.
Mr. Coates? Are you, is this in line with what you got envisioned?
What you talking about, though, I think that's a lot. You don't have to allow in long pieces of land, long narrow pieces of land. You're gonna allow more lots on, as I understand.
If the land's there, yes. Yeah, we're still restricted by the 3 acres and other things. Yes.
I understand that.
Okay.
As long as you have a road maintenance agreement, which makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comment from the public?
Yes, you heard from one coach, you may as well hear from the other.
Uh-oh.
I've seen situations, where here's the 50 feet and the neighbors don't get along, so one builds a 25 foot Well, one uses this 25 foot, the other uses the other 25 foot, you still get two roads with brush on both sides. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've seen it. Is there any way you put language in there that, you know, they use the center of the road for the property?
I would tend to shy away from that. I mean, if neighbors don't like each other, anything they do to isolate themselves and limit their contact. Otherwise, I can envision people playing a game of chicken every time they come home because they say that the ordinance requires them to use the center of the road.
Yeah, if the engineer has designed the road for your 50-foot right of way, I mean, theoretically, he would not have designed the two separate lanes to begin with. So.
Well, and the other part of it is, you know, they can, if the road's wide enough, they can stripe it. Well, seriously, I mean, there are a lot of subdivisions that have, you know, traffic control, you know, highway stripes.
Yeah.
Your utility easement is gonna be within the 50-foot right of way?
Typically, that's the way it's done.
Yeah, if it's required, yes.
That's the way the highway department does it, isn't it? So usually, yeah.
That's right. And most planned unit developments follow the, you know, the highway department's lead on that.
Okay. Any other public comment on that one?
Got one more coach sitting out there.
All right, just very, very quickly then. In the past few weeks, there's been some discussion about some of the problems that we encountered at our last joint session. We've been talking about some potentially improved practices. Most of these, I think, have been more or less administrative, but I had 4 points that I just wanted to mention very quickly and ask the other planning commission members to consider anything that might be added to that. What we're discussing is let's say the new information that appeared on an application at the last joint meeting. Point one, I think it's reasonable for the planning commission to expect complete and accurate applications. Second point, Ligon is now trying to schedule 2 workshop sessions for at least some applications to allow time to work through any problems before the application comes before a joint session. The next 2 are my opinions. If an application reaches the joint session and is discovered to be incomplete or inaccurate, the planning commission may want to consider recommending that the applicant table the application until the problems are corrected, instead of just moving forward with it. Fourth point, if the applicant chooses to proceed with an incomplete or inaccurate application, the planning commission may want to recommend against approval, especially if there is a significant change from the information in the public notice for the application. And I just asked each of you to see if you have any points that might improve the application process when it comes before us.
Could you send those around to us?
Yeah, I'll email a copy of this to everybody. Not that that's important, but yeah, that'll give us a starting point anyway.
And Mr. Chairman, you might
Yes.
want to make sure that makes it to the county website as a proposal.
Okay,
You may want some public input for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we were at that point yet, but yeah.
Okay, fair
yeah.
enough.
Maybe forward well, how about if we get input from the planning commission and then forward what we get to Ligon and have that put on the, yeah, okay. All right, any comment on that really quickly?
I got one quick comment on it, Steve. You mentioned you could ask the applicant if they wanted to table, but if they say no, then certainly the planning commission themselves can table it. The planning commission can table.
Okay.
And as part of that, they can require additional information from the applicant.
Yeah.
One of the concerns we have is sometimes we are trying to guess what the applicant actually needs or wants. And you don't want to be in a position where you pass something that does not solve the applicant's problem. And that's why the workshops are so important and why the application process is so important. A lot of it is just imposing some discipline on the applicants. Remember, they're the ones who are coming before us asking for things. And I don't think it's an unrealistic expectation for them to be prepared to answer all of the questions and hopefully have all the questions answered in advance so that you're not getting additional information, 3 hours before a meeting.
Yeah, especially significantly different information. Yes.
This is all a learning process as we hadn't dealt with the grant like that before. And I
Right,
understand it was quite confusing to figure out and learned a whole lot of information that night, especially on that one case. I just wanted to say that I do support that we, especially the workshop, you learn things at a workshop, which that's intended to do. We're one of the few counties, not everybody does it the way we do. They don't have as many meetings and they don't provide this opportunity. So it comes not just from committee, but also at the workshop. And I don't mind hearing new information or hearing, much more discussion. I do like to see, though, I feel very strongly by the time we get to the joint meeting that we know what we're saying and know all the information that we need to have. And I think that would help us a lot to not look like we're commissioners that didn't know what we were doing, because we have worked on it. But especially at the joint meeting, we respect our folks back here and we want to be able to make the right decision with all the information we need.
One brief comment related to that. Some of our neighbors to the north, it takes about 6 months from application time to Board of Supervisors. We are 2.5 to 3 months. Is that right?
I mean, if you come in and apply, I mean, you could be less than 30 days in some cases. I mean, so that's why I'm trying to do at least 2 workshops.
I think we have a 90-day maximum period, isn't it, for
the plan commission, right? You could
Yeah.
table for 30 days. So, I mean, that's, and I don't want to go too far, but that's sort of the joint meeting sort of speeds things up, and that's good in some respects. In some respects, it's bad. So,
And my point is just, we move things along
expeditiously.
fairly quickly.
Yes.
Fairly quickly compared to some of our neighbors.
Yeah.
Steve, the only thing that I would say to this is I think that they're good ideas, but if it's something that's real petty, let's don't go petty. We're here to help customers. And we're here to help taxpayers. So let's don't use this to be petty with, but something major. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but let's don't make it a petty thing.
Agreed. But may I ask, when you said that planning commission can table, if we table something, then the board would not act on it at a joint meeting? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
So we do have that authority.
That is correct. Now, the board can take it up anyway, but, your
Well, that's what I'm
actions are not
saying.
binding on the board.
Okay.
But chances are the board is going to follow your lead.
Yeah, the wording was a little bit vague on that, whether both the planning commission and the board could table or whether only the board could table.
Tables and what's
And I'll go through our bylaws and confirm
You
that.
absolutely can table it.
Okay.
You absolutely.
Okay.
It's nicer to recommend it first, though.
So instead of voting yes or no to send it, we just table it when we all agree that
If
that's what we
there's
need
a
to- or
problem,
enough of
yeah.
us agree.
If there's a big enough problem.
Yes.
Okay, any other, can we go home now? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second, okay, all in favor? Aye.
It's
2:20.
Okay.
We don't have Roger anymore.
Every other now.
Oh, this thing.
Are you gonna bring that or am I? 'Cause I keep bringing it
Oh,
too.
no, absolutely.
You are. Okay. I'll stop printing it out.
Anyway.
Carter, you around tomorrow? We do, what we call a pre-agenda.
You mean